So, what if a single algorithm could do more than just find oil? What if it could actually change the course of a war, or even predict the future? Today, we are diving deep into a really tangled web of documents. They all connect one geophysicist to this incredible story of international espionage, deep state corruption, and a piece of tech that is right on the edge of science and, well, science fiction.
It all kicks off with this. This is from a letter written by a man named Vadim Chernov to the FBI. Talk about a bold claim, right? He's alleging this massive conspiracy to sabotage a project that he says could completely redraw the geopolitical map of Europe. The stakes are just about as high as they get. And this letter, well, this is our ticket into a very, very deep rabbit hole.
Okay, so to make sense of all this, here's our game plan. We'll start with that explosive claim at the heart of the story. Then, we'll get to know the man himself and his pretty incredible algorithm. After that, we'll trace a timeline of intrigue and explore the alleged motives. We're talking energy, corruption, and war. Then, things get weird. We'll dive into myths, bloodlines, and power before we try to put all the pieces of this unsolved puzzle together.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the man and the algorithm. So who is this guy making these absolutely extraordinary claims? And what in the world is this technology that he says is so powerful?
Well, on paper, Vadim Chernov is a highly credible expert. I mean, he's a geophysicist with over 2 decades of experience, he's got a master's degree from Moscow State University, and he's the director of his own company. This is not just some random guy on the internet, you know? He's a professional in his field, and he's the inventor of something he calls the Ralph 1 algorithm.
And it's really important to know that his work is grounded in actual science. His methods are based on a documented technique called HRES-IP. Now, this isn't science fiction. It's a real-world method people use to map what's underground. You basically send electrical currents into the earth to find resources like oil and gas.
So, where does his invention, Ralph 1, come in? He calls it a logical filter, which is a pretty cool name. Think of it like this. Imagine you're trying to hear a single whisper in a super crowded, noisy room. What Ralph 1 supposedly does is cancel out all that background chatter, all the noise, and isolates just that one whisper. Only in this case, the whisper is the specific electromagnetic signal of oil deep underground.
And this is where the story takes a hard left turn into the bizarre. In his own writings, Chernov claims this algorithm, which by the way he also calls the observer, can do way more than just find oil. He actually claims it can predict the future. He even gives the example of predicting cryptocurrency prices. So just like that, we've gone from practical geology to something else entirely.
Okay, let's get into the timeline here, because this is where Chernov lays out what he sees as the core evidence of a conspiracy against him. And he connects his own personal story to one of the biggest global tragedies in recent memory.
Now, this document is absolutely crucial. It's an official letter from Interpol in Ukraine, and it confirms that Vadim Chernov's vehicle was put on an international wanted list at the request of the Russian Federation. So this isn't just an allegation, this is a documented fact. He was a wanted man. But it's the timing of it all that makes this so explosive.
Just look at these dates. On July 17, 2014, Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 is shot down over Ukraine. It's a horrific event. Just 4 days later, 4 days, Russia puts out an international alert for Chernov's car. Now, for Chernov, there's no way this is a coincidence. In his mind, this is the exact moment a superpower started targeting him and his technology.
So that brings us to the big question, right? Why? Why would a global superpower allegedly go after one geophysicist and his car? The motive, he alleges, lies right at the intersection of big energy, big money, and the war in Ukraine.
At the very heart of this is the Rava-Ruska oil project. Chernov says that by using his algorithm, he pinpointed a massive oil field in western Ukraine. We're talking potentially over 7 billion barrels. I mean, that's huge. He argues this field could pretty much single-handedly break Russia's energy chokehold on Europe. But he says the project was deliberately blocked for years, not because of any technical issues, but for political ones.
Now, Chernov's claims of obstruction don't just exist in a vacuum. He was working in an environment that was, by many accounts, rife with corruption. Just for some context, one really critical dialogue between Ukrainian commentators alleged a staggering 240 billion hryvnia had been mismanaged. Now, that's an unverified allegation, but official sources paint a pretty stark picture of their own.
So, an official internal audit of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense found 10 billion hryvnia in financial violations in just 4 months. Okay, that's a lot less than the allegation, but it's still an enormous sum of money. and it confirms that severe corruption was a documented real-world problem.
So no matter which number you focus on, the bigger picture is pretty clear. This was all happening in a country under incredible pressure, fighting a war against an external aggressor, and, at the same time, fighting a massive battle against internal corruption. And in that kind of environment, a project like Chernov's could easily get bogged down either for legitimate reasons or, like he claims, for much darker ones.
And just when you think you've got a handle on this story, that it's about oil and politics, it takes another wild turn. We're now heading into the realm of genetics, ancient history, and the story Chernov tells not just about his work, but about himself.
So Chernov gets his DNA analyzed, right? And the results are pretty unusual for someone with his background. It turns out both his paternal and maternal lines trace back to these really rare alpine haplogroups. We're talking origins in the Swiss, Italian, and Carpathian mountain regions. This kind of genetic signature is incredibly uncommon for Eastern Europeans. And he has completely embraced this genetic identity. He's quoted as saying, "I have zero genetic connection to the endless steppe. Mountains over flags." Now, this is more than just a comment on his ancestry. It's a full-blown political declaration. He's drawing a clear line between himself and what he sees as the Russian steppe identity, and instead aligning himself with the mountains of Central Europe.
And using this genetic foundation, he builds this epic personal history. He claims he's descended from the great Swiss-Italian architect who built St. Petersburg. He compares his own way of thinking to Yaroslav the Wise from Kievan Rus. He weaves together this family tapestry that includes aristocratic duels, anti-Tsarist revolutionaries, and famous scientists. It's a whole narrative of a noble, influential, and very distinctly European lineage.
And all of this culminates in something he calls Project Alpine. This is a conspiracy theory, one that Chernov himself promotes, that his unique genetic profile is no accident. He alleges it's the result of a secret KGB eugenics program designed to create an agent with deep European roots who could one day be activated. I have to be very clear here. There is zero independent evidence to back this claim up.
So this really forces us to ask a critical question. Are we just looking at a man exploring his really fascinating rare ancestry? Or is he actively building a modern myth around himself, creating a persona that actually fits the epic scale of his geopolitical claims? And that brings us to our final section, the unsolved puzzle. How do we even begin to make sense of Vadim Chernov? Is he a whistleblower, a victim, or something else entirely, a master storyteller?
You know, there are really two competing ways to see all this. On the one hand, you have the whistleblower, a brilliant geophysicist with world-changing tech who gets targeted by Russia and blocked by corruption because his project threatens the whole world order. But on the other hand, you have the storyteller, a man weaving this grand personal myth of engineered bloodlines and noble heritage, maybe as a way to make sense of incredible hardship, or to create a powerful legend for himself in the confusing fog of war.
In the end, we're just left with a puzzle. The documents, they're real. The Interpol listing is real. The corruption is absolutely real. But the stories that are built around these facts of predictive algorithms and KGB eugenics, they remain unverified. And that leaves us with one final, lingering question. In the fog of war, where information itself becomes a weapon, how do we ever truly separate a whistleblower's truth from a carefully constructed legend?